Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hope you had a good week. Maybe take the time to see everyone. Finish.
Wonderful to see folks. I'm here in my mom's bedroom in Massachusetts. Took a nice spring walk today. It's been beautiful here. So nice to be joining some of you on this time zone where sun is, well, there's still light out. We'll say that. All right. Should we get started? Yeah. Okay. So finding your seated posture. Right now, something that feels like a good balance in the body for where the mind, heart is in terms of energy, alertness, relaxation. I'm not trying to force anything into our posture, but sometimes some encouragement towards uprightness, awakeness, energy can be helpful. And just noticing, what do we notice in the body as we come to try to find a position to settle into. What experiences seem to be most clearly drawing the attention. And how are they changing? And how is the mind receiving them? Is there a sense of neutrality, kind of acceptance in general? Is there any sense of againstness in the mind toward the sensations that we're noticing in the body? Or any moving toward, and perhaps grasping, holding on. Being careful that we're not trying to antagonize the mind, antagonize the heart. or antagonize the body. And just trying to understand and see what we see. Especially in this powerful, dynamic relationship between mentality and materiality. This back and forth exchange. Back and forth dependence of one on the other. Conditioning. Sometimes we notice it in very subtle ways, and sometimes just more generally. Sensation in the body, conditioning, and experience in the mind. Setting the stage for it, setting the tone. And then the mind, conditioning, experience in the body. Sometimes it is in this form of just simple againstness or wanting. Sometimes it's more neutral. Sometimes we simply notice the mind state that's prevalent, a dullness or sharpness, a warm-heartedness, or a cold-heartedness. And you see the impact of the body receiving that, bearing the burden of that, or feeling the relief of that. Sometimes we may see the dexterity of the mind to receive even unpleasant sensations in the body with kindness, acceptance, pliability. Just aware of this interplay, even as we may start to bring the attention more in alignment with just one part of what's happening, whether it's in the physical sensations of the body, all of the range of pressure and tension, hardness, softness, coolness and warmth, moisture, dryness, tingling, zinging, kinds of sensations we might not have words for directly. Just how much energy it takes and effort to simply observe and keep up with all of the changes and flood of experience happening throughout the body. But also we can see that the mind is right there to also be observed. With every moment of physicality, there's a knowing of it, a mental experience. And that can lead to other mental experiences, emotion, thoughts, knowing. Or it might return right back to the body, a new sensation, new phenomena. Even if we narrow the attention more into just the rising and falling sensations around the abdomen as we breathe. Of course, we're also always observing the mind, heart. Or if we are observing the field of, or the hands, what we call the hands, touching our knees or touching each other on the lap. The mind is always right there, happening, observing, knowing, ruminating, wanting, not wanting, caring, accepting. Of course, there are sounds, there are sights, smells, taste, all considered in the realm of physicality ultimately, based on the various sensitivities in the body. All those can be known, and the knowing is known. There's nothing that needs to be outside of the field of our awareness, of our care, this pliability, sensitivity of mind. And nothing that can happen that's outside of what we should be observing. All of it worthy, vital, important. Hopefully fascinating, or at least somewhat interesting. Watching the body, watching the mind, taking our time with no agenda, nowhere to get to, nothing to attain, just observing, trying to understand what it is that's happening in each moment. And how that momentum is moving through to the next and the next. So Michelle and I have been enjoying the Q&A sessions we've been doing the last couple of weeks, and so just thought we'd offer some more time for that. If anyone had any questions about your practice, about instructions, anything that we might be able to support you with for the week ahead, I'd be happy to take some time. And just as usual, a reminder that if you have a question, the best way to let us know is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. There's a little reactions button. You can hit the raise hand. Let us know you have a question. Otherwise, you can just type that you have a question in the chat and we'll call on you to ask it. And let me change one setting here. Great. Hi, Annie.
Hi.
Hi, Annie.
Hi. I've been playing around with my relationship with my body. I've spent years dealing with pain while sitting, and it's so much better now. And I've been doing different things, but one of the things I noticed is that I still have this tendency to follow tight places around my body. And I have this tendency to want to interrupt and do something about it. And I'll never forget the instruction you gave, Jesse, during the week on equanimity in January, when you said, there's nothing you need to do. And I went, oh my God, that is such a relief. I don't have to do anything. And it kind of set me on this path to trying to understand, or trying to really understand when it is I'm allowing the tension to be there and just be there without doing anything about it. And when I'm chasing some kind of relief, it's really hard because the relief that I seek is very subtle. It's incredibly subtle. It's like adding space here or breathing into that there. And since I don't, and since I rarely have pain it doesn't cause me to move. So I'm not doing that kind of shifting. I'm just trying to figure out when I'm just allowing it to be, because I've gotten so used to, okay, there's a little hitch there. Let me spend some time and see if I can create some space. And the other thing that I have found really interesting and explored is that if I allow it to be an ocean, then I'm not creating the movement. The movement is just created in a natural movement in the body, within the body, because the breath moves my body. So I don't know, I'm just exploring all this stuff and trying to sort it out and trying to allow the instruction of there's nothing you need to do, because that was so lovely, Jesse. I just need to hear that all the time. There's nothing you need to do. So thank you.
Just put on repeat. Well, but so what do you notice? Like, what do you notice about when that sort of level of really equanimity and acceptance is there, and when it's not? And is there anything to be done about that?
I don't really know. I'm still playing around with, am I making that change in my body by doing something consciously?
Mm-hmm.
Or is that just the natural movement of the breath and the body and just, just one of those waves of action that happens internally? I mean, it's all subtle stuff. It's not like I'm moving my fingers or my hands or my shoulders um, and I just really don't know. I'm trying to tease it out. But
Yeah.
when I feel like I really let go is when I allow it to be like an ocean and I'm just bobbing in the waves.
Yeah.
A little fish.
Yeah.
No, a buoy. I'm more like
Boy,
a buoy.
Yeah, I can start. I don't know, Michelle, do you want to start? Do you have a
Go ahead.
I mean, I think Annie, what's so cool, or one of the things that's so great about it is it, and I think you recognize that what you're talking about is very subtle. You know, it's very subtle. And so that just in itself is just really great and important, you know, and I think there is that level of like something about getting that at that level of subtlety, you have, it's all very delicate, you know, like if you start trying to tinker too much, it's not refined enough for actually what you're, the kind of the subtlety of what you're, kind of the level you're working at it with. So it's like you need to be kind of subtle in response to this investigation. I think that it's very important to see what you're seeing, the way in which we will try to use the attention to control experience, right? And we'll use the breath, right? Like that phrase, like, you know, breathe into it as a kind of, you know, you'll hear that a lot in like a yoga class or something, right? This sense of like that you're manipulating something energetically, physically, mentally, some kind of space that might not be clearly one or the other, right? To make things more pleasant. I mean, because that's all it is, and that's what you're seeing, right? It's like, oh, there's actually just like there's something unpleasant. It's not so unpleasant that you're jumping out of your seat or you're even moving your finger, but you can see that there's a preference for it not to be there, and that you're trying to use tools in the realm of practice to change it. And those are the most tricky things to because they're so seductive, because it feels like it's practice, but really you're just controlling, and you see that. You know, so it's cool, right, to be like, oh wow, this is happening, this attempt to manipulate is happening at such a subtle level, and it's harder to see when you think that actually that's your practice. That so when you start to see that, like, oh yeah, so much of maybe what we're doing with the mind and the attention is actually trying to make things how we want them to be, you know, it's humbling in a good way, and can be overwhelming when you start to see kind of how much we're doing it, you know. So I think that it's really, yeah, it's like wonderful to see. I think you're right in that sense of that it is not the purest Vipassana, right? It doesn't mean it's like wrong or wicked. It's like, it's not wrong or wicked to move your finger or to change position. But it's important to see, it's like, oh, the aversion is actually too much or unseen. There's the unpleasantness, it feels like more than the mind can bear, and so we have to shift positions physically. Or that we're playing that out on more subtle levels of like, oh, there's an unpleasantness, there's an aversion, there's a wanting of something else there, and the mind buys into that, and you know, tries to look for some space or tries to find something in there that's not so confining in an unpleasant way. So, you know, you see that the mind does have certain capacities around that, and that's amazing. And it is this sort of dance between like power and wisdom that we're involved in the practice, you know, of where can we really just let things be as they are and bear it, and that's hard, you know. And so you don't want to also, like I said, like you don't want to antagonize the mind for doing that either, but the seeing of it is powerful, you know, and the seeing of it often can be enough to just to see that it's that the tension in the mind in regard to the tension in the body is actually also unpleasant and unnecessary. And so when you see it, it's like somehow it's like that, it's an invitation towards more equanimity in the mind. So there's a way that the mind unhooking from needing to do it unhooks the body from feeling like from the mind feeling like it needs to, the body needs to change. So I don't really feel like there's a lot I would say to like change what you're doing, because I think what you're exploring is really important. I think there is a dance, kind of one of the things you said initially around that the mind will follow sort of intense sensations throughout the body. And I think there's an interesting dance there of like, where might it be that you just sort of stay with one instead of following it around? Because that does start to become a little, can start to become a little more feeling like there's a project, right? That you're kind of like untangling, you're kind of moving through and sort of like doing this project of untangling in the body that can be very seductive and definitely doesn't lead anywhere productive. But it's also very, can be very compelling. Sometimes unpleasant sensation, pain, can be very concentrating. And so there's some, might be a place where it's like, well, what is it to actually just sort of stick with something for a while and see what is the relationship there, instead of sort of maybe following something around the body. None of this is hard and fast, because I think you're doing like an interesting exploration already. I think the other side is also an interesting question. What did you say I said? You don't
There's
need to.
nothing you need to do.
Okay, right. So like, what if that's also true for the mind? It's just like, think maybe that's true too. And then see what that's like to practice with like both of those things being true. It isn't to say that, of course, and we have method, and we sometimes there is something where like, oh, follow the breath, or bring the attention here, or bring the attention there. But like, what is it at times to be like, oh, there's nothing you need to do with the mind either? And like, what does that mean? And how would you want to experience that? I think is well, maybe like another interesting place to explore.
I think I do. I think I do. When I hear there's nothing you need to do, I hear it as my mind
Both.
doesn't need
Okay,
to
great.
do this. So
Yeah,
I hear it as, yeah, that my mind can unhook from that activity
yeah.
and just allow it. Yeah. So and when I gave myself that instruction,
Mm.
a few minutes later, I had a really pleasant. I felt happy. So there was a relief from that, unhooking. There
Yeah.
was a relief from hooking that, yeah, yeah. So I think partly what I'm hearing is that it might be useful for me to label it aversion and just say what it is.
Yeah, or
That I'm
wanting,
chasing.
right. Yeah. There, yeah.
Yeah,
I
or
think that can be
wanting,
helpful. Yeah,
wanting
absolutely.
aversion or something. Want, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I don't
So
know.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Michelle.
Yeah. I think that it's hard to accept that equanimity is impermanent. And so I think for all of us that like when we're not controlling, when equanimity is present, we're not motivated to do things out of greed, hatred, and delusion, so that it feels that the peace actually feels wonderful. It makes us the happiness of peace. The Buddha said there's no greater happiness than peace. So I think that it's really important to know that what's hard is when the controller comes back. You're like, so if there's a controlling, there's a controlled, and that is painful. It's just a painful situation. It's not peace. So I think that when it's like, what did you say? It's like we know fundamentally that we're breathing, and that if we don't control it, we're still going to breathe, right? Like there is that level where life will keep doing itself if we are peaceful and we're not doing things with things. We understand that, but like that peace is impermanent, and that a fully enlightened being is said to be have sixth sense door equanimity, so that every moment when something appears at a sense door, there's peace, there's equanimity. And getting that flavor of that is so important, because it's so motivating to see that we're capable. We're all of us are capable of that, no matter what personality we have, no matter what conditioning we have. We don't have to perfect that to be peaceful. I think that's such an important thing. And just I would look at the aversion that comes when the controller comes back, because that tends to be where we all get hooked, is that rather than yield into it. So that when the controlling aversion attachment is usually the thing that happens, that there's a tension. That's the mind tightens, and we don't like it after we haven't been doing that. So that if you can accept it, as just a tightening of the mind, we're talking subtle. So this is subtle. This is actually the experience of it can be very subtle. Of course, it can be very unsubtle. We can be really upset or, really wanting, but like often in the moment to moment formal practice, it can be a whisper. It can be a slight, light breeze of not liking something, right? And so much of this is, it's so humbling. It's so humbling to go from the places when we're accepting and have that peace to the place where there is no peace. So that's that rhythm. I think of it as a rhythm of equanimity, being okay with having no equanimity, and not being okay with having no equanimity. Right? Like there's different possibilities, right? And that like you learn to be okay with all of them. Having, not okay with being not okay with not being okay is like the hardest one to be okay with, but it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that really, just to be clear, that's kind of what I was meaning when it's like it's like sometimes, like you're saying, you have access to, oh, I don't need to do anything, and then it's like, that there's that access to equanimity, but that can also be true when there's not equanimity. That you don't need to fight that, right? That you can be okay with not being okay with what's happening.
And I've been able to play with that some too.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun that it feels playful. That's good, and sometimes, of course, it won't, and that's okay.
I love that moment when we go from it's being totally okay to, well, it's okay that it's not okay. And then it's like, it's not okay that it's not okay. Like, it's like learning to be with all that. That's being in the ocean. But it takes time to accept those shifts, right? Because that's what we get identified with, the peace. We're missing, there's something we're missing there somewhere along the line. It becomes my peace, so that it hurts so much to lose it. We lose it. Or it's my controlling, right? It's all, it feels like a big loss. when you're on a roll, it all starts to feel like, a bummer when you lose it. It's true.
Yeah. Well, I don't have enough equanimity to experience the constant loss of it. So I'm not in that boat yet. But thank you.
Yeah.
This is great. I've been working with this for a while. So thank you.
Great, Annie. Sun, is that your, I've never seen a thing move. That was pretty cool. Were you trying to raise your hand too? Look at that. You have an animated thumbs up. There we go.
I can't. We
I think
can't hear you.
she's a little or on my screen you're frozen
Oh.
there, Sun. There we go.
Yeah. So this reminds me like the mantra that you used to hear you, like everything is okay, whatever happen is okay. Mindfulness is the soft readiness of the mind to be able to be with whatever come up.
That's it. Yep. Soft. Yeah, I mean that it's like the mindfulness means that the awareness is connected to anicca, right? There's a connection to the truth, like the Dhamma. The Dhamma is like anything can happen. So when we're connected to that truth, then soft readiness can happen. Like the mind isn't hard, right? It's soft. Yeah. So I think that it's so important to make sure we're connecting this with that mindfulness is an awareness that has a connection with the truth. That's really, really important. So I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. And
I
so
mean,
when yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I don't think we usually use like the language of like it's okay or that everything is okay so much as like a phrase, because we do have to be careful with like, you want to acknowledge when things are not okay, like there's violence or there's harm or that there are actions that are taken by ourselves or others that are going to have negative consequences. And so we try to be careful of like, we're not trying to saying that like we're okay, everything's okay, because it's all, I mean, in fact, first noble truth is like, actually there's suffering, that things are not okay ultimately on like a very fundamental level, and that's outside of even like ethics and morality, is like there is a difficulty on even just even when things feel like they're okay, there is a hard difficulty to them, never mind when things are actually not okay, so but the idea that there can be an okayness of the heart, an okayness of the mind, right, a steadiness and acceptance, like Michelle is saying, an alignment with the truth of what's happening, that's incredibly stable and incredibly unwavering in its commitment to kindness and generosity and patience and care, and still connected to love amidst all the turmoil. Like that flavor of okayness is available to the heart, which is different than saying like that's okay, like it's okay that this just happened, or that this is the world is as it is. It's just, it's hard to, you don't need to we don't need to try to go against the parts of ourselves that also recognize suffering and hardship is important too. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, like that's why like when I use the word like everything is okay, it's more like the readiness of the mind to accept whatever happened and then act from it.
Yeah, that's
right.
That's
What
great.
exactly, like there's a way of saying everything is okay personally for ourselves that like can lead to that. And I think from our position, if we were to tell everyone to just say everything is okay, there's going to be like so much recoiling against like, wait, things are not okay. So it's like, if you say, like, repeating that to yourself feels like it invites you into that place of acceptance and soothing, that beautiful quality of mind. It's wonderful. And it's going to be different for everyone of like, what is it, like the kind of language that works.
Yeah. So like from that we go to equanimity.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
it's like if you're ready for anything to happen, then what's appearing, there isn't an expectation that experience is supposed to yield something for us, right? Like equanimity is when we're not doing anything with what's appearing. You know, the breath comes and goes by itself. The sound comes and goes by itself. The fear comes and goes by itself. The rage comes and goes by itself, right? It includes everything. It includes the body sensations coming, they're coming and going. It's insight. It's insight that, you know, that it's insight that leads to equanimity. It's that ability to understand that things are unfolding, the pleasant, unpleasant, neutral is that stream of change is unfolding according to natural law. So it's that quality of relationship that we have with it. And when something's painful and we're not accepting it, of course, then there's the aversion to it, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I feel like I already like things beings are the being as they are, but then we accept it, but we find a way to deal with it.
Right, right. That's the wise attention, wise attention. So we're not reacting. We're responding. We're not it's not that knee-jerk conditioned reaction. Actually, we can be interested in pain. Not easy, but yeah, that's what you're saying, that the piece is and as Jesse says, the not antagonizing the mind. The piece is in we're not resisting what's happening, and so that we have a relationship with it, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's great. When you're wanting an object, you don't have a relationship with it. When you're pushing an object away with, you know, with anger, or you're afraid of it, that's the quality of that relationship isn't there. It's better to shift to having a quality of relationship with the aversion or the fear or the wanting at that point. It's like getting clear what's the predominant object, and that's where you're attempting with equanimity, for example, that okay, there's a pain, something painful, and then there's aversion to it, and if that's what's happening, that's accepting things as they are. So we always have a chance. You're not demonizing aversion and attachment. You're going, oh, can I be aware? The quality of awareness shifts to getting, we all need a better and better relationship. We need more and more of a relationship with aversion and attachment. Yeah. That's how equanimity, deepens.
Because it's hard to accept like what is happening right now in the world.
That's an understatement. Hear, hear. Heartbreaking.
But I think that's it exactly. You know, it's like accepting doesn't mean that it's actually okay. It's not saying it's okay that this is happening. That's why we're careful not to use that language. It's like accepting the fact that it's happening, that this is true, that beings are suffering, that people are not interested in their own emotions, and people are, you know, treat each other badly and are, you know, at the mercy of their entanglements, you know, and that we're, even those of us who are trying so hard to, you know, free ourselves, it's like, you know, we sometimes it's like we can be more sensitive to just our own, the ways that we continue to repeat, you know, behaviors and cycles that are causing difficulty for ourselves or for others, you know. So the sensitivity is important, it's good, but it can be overwhelming, you know, and that is part of the point of the reminding ourselves of the okayness is here. Accept it. It's like the mind can bear it, right? That ultimately the mind can bear all of the suffering in the world. And that's like, it's just incredible, right? That we, and that sometimes it feels like we can't even bear our own sadness, you know, our own loneliness, or the aching in our toe, you know. And something about the scale of it maybe gets distorted, right? But that the heart is able to actually be at peace and caring, and not lose its connection to love and compassion and stability and clarity, you know, amidst total connection with all of the hardship and difficult things in the world, you know. And so it's that fine line between like, where is that inspiring, you know, and where are we so humbled by the reality of our own minds at certain times, you know, that just get angry or just get bitter, you know, sad. And then to know that that's okay. It's like, well, that's the scale that we're at right now. It's like, is there really a difference between the feeling of all the suffering in the world and our own irritation in this moment? Is that difference in scale just an idea, you know? And it's like, well, this moment, the world is consumed with this irritation, you know, and to respect it that much, you know, as if it was the irritation of the world, sometimes can be important, you know.
And I'd like to, we have a neighbor that got really hurt by somebody that had road rage. Somebody came after her while she was driving and eventually bashed her car, totaled her car, and she has a couple of broken vertebrae in her back. And I was trying to help her find a doctor, and I think it was yesterday morning. Yeah, the doctor was the day before yesterday. And her and her husband were driving by down at my little road, and she has to wear a brace for 3 months, like all the time. Like, and she's very active, has work. She has to stop work, and it's a big deal. And so she rolled down the window, and I said, "How are you doing?" And she said, "Well, this is very hard for someone like her to say." She was like, "Well, sometimes I'm getting grumpy, you know." It's like it was the worst thing in the world, right? Like sometimes I'm getting grumpy, and I'm like, whoa, if you're not grumpy, like I think something's really wrong with you. Like, of course you're grumpy. Like you're gonna be grumpy and grumpier as this goes on. You know, it's like, like, but it was like it's like there's this other side where people don't think it's okay to, like, as Jesse says, have emotion. And it's like, whoa, right? Let's, you know. And I looked at her husband and I'm like, it's okay that she's grumpy, right? Like, and he's like, yeah, of course, right? Like, it's like, yeah, but do you see what I mean? And you look at if you add all the suffering in the whole planet, onto our hearts, of course, it's going to be a little challenging, like at times to like, have a relationship with that, of letting ourselves respond and get a relationship with whatever happens in our heart and relationship to it. So it's really important not to have a script.
Right. But then Kanbarasi said, Ganesh is like doing the best we can.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's amazing is like, we actually, like, everyone really is actually doing the best they can. And that's like pretty scary, you know? But I think it's like that perspective is, I think that's like really important, you know?
I think, you know, this reminds me of the end of the discussion last week where it was like, the end of the discussion was like, is just being with somebody with unconditional love, like, and enough, right? Like if say you're with someone and they're really suffering and you're with them, like, and is there a feeling like, why wouldn't sitting with Deepama at a point where you're really down and out, but you're still down and out, right? It hasn't changed, but there's this unconditional love. Does that mean that Deepama's metta isn't enough? And it's the same with the world, like the suffering in the world. It's like, if you have moments of like total compassion, is that enough? Is the Dhamma enough? Is the peace enough? Like, I think these are really important questions. And then if we have a reaction to it and we attempt to get a relationship with that of peace and compassion, is that enough? It's like, I think that's doing the best we can, really. But we have doubt because we feel like we should be able to end all the suffering on the planet, or with a friend. Like, it's like we think we can control that much. It's very humbling again, you know, it's very humbling to look at these questions and see how much we can do and how much we can't. Like, it's accepting our humanity and our limitations, but really important to look at what is good enough. Like, what is good enough?
Yeah. Maybe we should take one more from Samantha here. Thanks, Sun.
Yeah.
Hi.
Thanks, Samantha.
I think you answered my question, Michelle, but I just wanted to make sure I understood it right. So if equanimity comes from insight, and you know, the frustration, like Jesse was describing, is coming from the inability to understand that level of suffering that is so deep, right? So understand, like, you know, for me, it's ongoing. I can't understand how a country like Burma, where so much beauty can come from, at least for me personally, and for so many people I know, at the same time, there's so much suffering and nothing is really moving, at least that at the way as I can see. So the frustration with, I can't see it. And then you keep talking about accepting our limitations, and it is humbling and frustrating. When I hit that wall, it's kind of like, I just want to get up and not sit for now. I'm gonna have a cup of tea. But then I come back, and often that sense of unfairness, right? Things that injustice is, wow. And I know that anything can happen at any moment. And I know that I don't understand karma. It's very complex, but I really wish I could.
Oh, so do you want to go first?
Well, but like Samantha, I think it's cool is like, you don't feel like that lack of understanding keeps you from acting, right? Like you're still moved to like engage and act and try your best to have that be coming from a place of compassion and kindness and, you know, and understanding that, yeah, sometimes it's coming from frustration or, you know, other things. But I think like what your life, to me, you know, my perspective, it's like that's the dance, right? It's like we're trying to understand, but we're not paralyzed because we don't have full understanding either. You know, it's like we're still engaged in our lives and in the world, and trying to be forces for the things that we're aligned with, and we see the ways that we make mistakes, or we see the ways that we're attached to outcome, and we try to, you know, that's a purifying process of you know, being humble and also seeing that, you know, not waiting for perfect motivation is not a way that we're going to abide by either, you know. So that just seems to me, it sounds like it's like you're in it, you know. There's wanting to understand more clearly, of course. There's wanting to be coming from a more and more pure place. We see the places in which it isn't always, of course, but you're not paralyzed by it, you know. You're still engaged in it in a way that's trying to feed your practice and have your practice feed your engagement, you know. Does that sound, I don't know, does that feel familiar?
So then at the moment, I just sit and continue. Continue.
I think Jesse's trying to say that not being able to understand the karma of what's happening in Burma isn't stopping you from being compassionate and acting and practicing, and which is like really something important to consider in terms of your own faith, like that it's like you're not letting the befuddlement of like, how can this happen, and the injustice of it stop you from caring. And I think that's a very important, you know, and I don't think there's any way to really, I think that if you really looked at the history of Burma and like the last even 100 years there and the actual power structures and what happened, there would be a level where you would understand how this actually happened. But I think sometimes I take refuge in the Jungian, Carl Jung, you know, his teachings around how when there's so much goodness that it can attract the opposite. And that doesn't necessarily explain the details of the causation and effect and cause and effect, but it does give a sense that when I first went into Burma, and it felt like the ground, the basement in the ground there was so much goodness. I mean, and it's what we all love, like the people and the monks and nuns, and it's like it's
alive.
Yeah, it's so vital and so alive. And then to have this, what I felt, even my first year there, was horrendous dictatorship, horrendous darkness. Like that was a long time ago. And so this blanket coming down, it felt just like what I understood about what Carl Jung was trying to say, that these opposites will happen, that it doesn't mean that it's fair, but it certainly consistently is observable in the world, in the human world. It's like it doesn't totally explain it, but it can give you a sense of like, wow, if you look at look at what happened to Martin Luther King, you know, he's just walking down the road and all the snipers come out. Like he's attracting it, yeah, by his goodness. He got interviewed. They had to rescue him. They had to helicopter him out of Chicago when they were doing a march, and the interviewer was like, you know, what? How can you take? What is this? And he's like, all I'm doing is bringing the evil out into the open. He knew what he was doing. That's unusual.
Yeah, which is the first, right? It's there. It's the suffering. It's the pain.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And so that was all brewing when I got to Burma, which was again quite a while ago. That was already brewing. They almost did it. It had this hope, and then, man, that was planned. If you look at it all, it was a setup. Anyway, that's
And
my
I think the other thing to just like, this is why we've sort of been saying everything today that we've been saying. It's like, because it is the same as our own practice. It's like if we think that the practice is only about getting to equanimity and getting to loving kindness and maintaining these states and this sort of like ignoring all of the rest, then we are building an immature, unsustainable spiritual practice, right? If we're ignoring all of the doubt and all of the rage and all of the jealousy and all of the stuff in our own hearts that we don't want to look at, that we just want it to go away, we want it to disappear, we want to just keep building all of this stuff that we think is the best and the better, and we don't have a relationship with the aversion, with the not wanting, with the, this is why we're saying it's like we have to actually have a relationship with the aversion, a relationship with the attachment, with the wanting, with the all of the ickiness and all of the things we might be ashamed of in ourselves and our own hearts and minds. Because as long as we're excluding that, as long as we think when those things arise, oh, we're not doing the practice right and we need to go to this other thing that feels better and is like the, of course, the refuge of equanimity, how beautiful it is. But it's like that is very fragile. It's a very fragile, ultimately naive and controlling existence and mentality and spiritual practice that we're cultivating if we don't start to use the relief that we find from concentration, from loving kindness, from these beautiful mind states to actually start to open up and build a relationship with all of the shadow, and the sort of opposite aspects of ourselves. And yes, just like in Burma or wherever, these places, it's like you can romanticize the goodness, but it's like if we don't have that sense of honesty, right? And the reality that this is a purifying process. The practice is purifying. So that the more that we find a connection to goodness, the more we find equanimity, the more we're also going to encounter hatred, anger, wanting, craving, addiction, these things. It's like, and that is part of what's very difficult about the path is like, we have to be willing to show up for more and more of the unpleasant, actually, as we get stronger, right? So we're not doing it without the strength of the stability of mindfulness and the refuge of an anchor or the refuge of loving kindness at times. And we only try to expand and go outward into the more difficult things at the rate that our mindfulness can follow, or the speed at which our kindness can follow. If we start to go beyond that, then we drown, right? In these shadow areas and these difficulties and these vortexes, And so that's what's very humbling is like recognizing, at this moment, actually, there isn't enough stability to go into this painful place, to go into this anxiety, to go into this wanting, and to sort of like, learn to kind of pull back and be humble about what the mind is capable in any moment. But to recognize that by doing that, we build up the strength and the trust in our system to go into the more difficult places, the places that we're less, we're more ashamed of, the places that we don't want to present to the world in terms of our, inner workings of things that are unresolved still in our hearts and minds. And that is an important part of the practice, as much as it is an important part of any society, right, is going to have this like range. And until we're willing to be in relationship with all of it, it's going to be out of balance.
Thank you. Very,
Yeah.
very.
Yeah, wonderful question. One more week. You can do it. Step by step. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, that's a great Sangha. We love you. We love you.
Take care, everybody.